ADR. Promoting dialogue.
It's midday in Dakar, Banjul, Lomé and Ouagadougou, 1 p.m. in Porto Novo, Abuja and Niamey. Good afternoon and many thanks for staying tuned to West Africa Democracy Radio broadcasting on 94.9 FM and around the world on wadr.org. Welcome to Newslink. Here are the top stories. Flags fly at half-marks in Nigeria as the country mourns former President Muhammadu Buhari. Meanwhile, African leaders and the AU have been paying glowing tribute to the late Nigerian leader.
He tried his best. It's a loss to the nation because at a time like this, we need the totality of the experience and what I may call statesmanship of all those who have had the opportunity to run the affairs of this country.
Vice President of PPACI, Don Mello, urges party to consider backup candidate amid Gbagbo's ineligibility. Togo's military goes to the polls today for municipal elections ahead of the July 17 elections amid government ban on new protests.
The Togolese government will ensure by all means that public order is maintained so that every Togolese citizen can go about their activities freely.
Beninese journalist Komlaso Sokpe to appear in court following controversial extradition from Côte d'Ivoire. Details of these stories and more coming up shortly. Please stay with us.
Christopher Aticho with Newslink.
Many thanks for joining our broadcast and a warm welcome to our listeners within and beyond the sub-region. Newslink begins in Nigeria as the country is mourning its immediate past president, Muhammadu Buhari, who died in London at the age of 82. President Bola Tinubu has expressed deep sorrow and directs Vice President Kashim Shettima to lead a government delegation to bring the former leader's remains back to the country. As tribute continues to pour in, supporters and admirers are reflecting on Buhari's legacy. WADR's Abuja correspondent Usma Umar has more.
The news of former President Muhammadu Buhari's death has thrown Nigeria into a moment of reflection and mourning. Known for his austere lifestyle and reputation as an anti-corruption crusader, Buhari leaves behind a controversial but impactful political legacy that spanned military and civilian leadership. From his early days as a military head of state between 1984 and 1985 to his eventual emergence as a democratically elected president in 2015, Buhari's political journey was marked by resilience. He contested Nigeria's presidency 3 times unsuccessfully before clinching victory on his 4th attempt, a landmark moment in the country's democratic evolution. Throughout his 2-term presidency, which ended in May 2023, Buhari promised to tackle insecurity, revive the economy, and fight corruption. 3 areas where opinions remain sharply divided on his performance. Abdullahi Haruna, author of the book The Buhari in Us, and a longtime admirer who named one of his sons after the former president, describes Buhari as a symbol of discipline and sacrifice.
Perhaps the most defining legacy of Muhammadu Buhari was his uncompromising stance against corruption, both as a military head of state and as a 2-time elected civilian president. He championed what I call transparency, physical discipline, and institutional efforts to combat graft, mostly notable through his support of agencies like the EFCC and the ICPC.
For many like Haruna, Buhari's appeal went beyond politics. He embodied a generational model of leadership rooted in restraint, patriotism, and personal frugality, attributes that resonate with citizens disillusioned by political excess. But his time in office also saw mounting criticisms over human rights concerns, growing insecurity in parts of the country, and an economy that struggled to recover from global and domestic shocks. As Nigerians prepare to receive his remains, national flags fly at half-mast and condolence messages continue to pour in from across the region and beyond. Former President Buhari may have taken a final bow, but the debate over his legacy is far from over. For Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, Usman Umar reporting from Abuja.
Meanwhile, African leaders, the African Union and the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, have paid glowing tribute to the late Muhammadu Buhari. The African Union chair, Mahmoud Ali Yusuf, praised Buhari as a principled Pan-Africanist and steadfast advocate for regional integration, good governance and peace across the continent. In a statement late Sunday, President of ECOWAS Commission, Dr. Umar Aliyu Toure, said Buhari's legacy in sustaining democracy and regional integration will be remembered. Sierra Leone's president and current chairperson of ECOWAS Authority of Heads of State, Julius Maada Bio, also described Muhammadu Buhari as a man of honor whose contribution to Africa's stability will be cherished. Gambian President Adama Barrow hailed him as a chairman or as a champion of peace in the region, recalling his decisive role in resolving Gambia's 2016 political crisis. Back home in Nigeria, the late statesman Buhari will be remembered for his pragmatic and solution-driven leadership style, both as a military head of state and as a civilian. Here is former President Olusegun Obasanjo.
He tried his best. It's a loss to the nation, because at a time like this, we need the totality of the experience and what I may call statesmanship of all those who have had the opportunity to run the affairs of this country in the past to get us out of the situation we are in. He will be sorely missed, and may his soul rest in perfect peace.
Former Nigerian President Olusegun Obasanjo. Meanwhile, author of the book Buhari NS, Haruna Abdullahi, is also a public commentator, and he shares his opinion about the late president.
President Muhammadu Buhari left behind a legacy deeply rooted in integrity. You can call it patriotism and principled governance. His leadership, spanning decades of public service, both in military and democratic roles, actually gave several enduring hallmarks. Chiefly amongst them, you have integrity and anti-corruption. Perhaps the most defining legacy of Muhammadu Buhari was his uncompromising stance against corruption, both as a military head of state and as a two-time elected civilian president. He championed what I call transparency, physical discipline, and institutional efforts to combat graft, mostly notable through his support of agencies like the EFCC and the ICPC.
Haruna Abdullahi is the author of the book Buhari NS and also a public commentator. Let's move away from Nigeria and delve into matters of elections, this time around in Togo, as the electoral campaign for the municipal elections will end this Tuesday. The vote is scheduled for July 17, 2025. But ahead of that, military personnel will cast their ballots early this Monday, which is currently ongoing. After a slow start with just few days left for the end of the campaign, candidates are now actively engaged on the grounds, including opposition parties that had initially threatened to boycott the process. Sankole Janko reports.
During the first week of the campaign, the opposition had not yet launched their activities, opting instead to honor the victims of protests held late June against the government. Now, opposition parties such as the Alliance Nationale pour le Changement, ANC, Forces Démocratiques pour le Nouveau, FDRC, and Dynamique pour la Majorité du Peuple, DMP, are all actively campaigning as the deadline approaches. The military vote will take place this Monday from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. local time. On election day, Thursday, July 17, the military will be responsible for securing the polling stations. Also today, a new anti-government protest is expected, called by Togolese influencers based abroad. The protest has gained the support of the political opposition, including Jean-Pierre Fabre, president of the ANC.
Anything that helps weaken the system in place, we support. So you want me to criticize that? Never. Anything that contributes to weakening it and exposing to the international community who they really are, I support it.
However, the government has banned all demonstrations planned for Monday and says that all necessary measures have been put in place to ensure that the municipal elections are held peacefully. Hoda Balo Awate is the Minister of Territorial Administration.
The Togolese government will ensure by all means that public order is maintained so that every Togolese citizen can go about their activities freely. The elections will indeed take place on June 17. All necessary measures have been taken, and there will be no leniency for anyone who attempts to disturb public order.
This year's municipal elections are taking place in a tense socio-political climate. Since June, a wave of youth-led protests has emerged, calling for an end to the current regime.
Lome's correspondent Sivi Wadrago's report presented by Sankule Janko.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
In Benin, journalist Komla Susukbe is scheduled to appear before the judge this Monday. The outspoken critic of the regime was arrested in Côte d'Ivoire late last week and subsequently extradited to Benin. His arrest was based on an international warrant issued by the Court for the Repression of Economic Offences and Terrorism (CREED). He is currently being held in pre-detention trial at Wadr prison. Augustin Colley has the details in this report.
Sosukwe had traveled to Abidjan to participate in the Agri-Tech Forum at the official invitation of the Ivorian government when he was arrested at his hotel. He had initially been assured that due to his refugee status, he would be presented before a judge in Côte d'Ivoire. However, he was flown instead to Cotonou, Benin, where he now awaits legal proceedings. He is expected to appear this Monday morning before the Commission on Freedoms and Detention, but his lawyer, Max Apogon, has raised concerns over the circumstances surrounding his arrest.
There are serious concerns about the conditions under which he was apprehended. As a recognized refugee, he is entitled to specific protections and rights. He cannot legally be returned to a country where he fears for his safety or freedom. These arrests are unlawful, as I've already stated. I referenced this refugee status, which is protected under the 1951 Geneva Convention, to which both Benin and Côte d'Ivoire are signatories. What we are witnessing is a clear violation of that convention, and we are formally denouncing it.
In a similar case from August 2024, Benin's Saba activist Steve Amusu, another critic of the government, was arrested in Togo and brought back to Benin. He was sentenced to 2 years in prison that past June. Susokwe's lawyer fears that his client may suffer a similar fate.
He is currently being held at the Wadr Detention Center. He is in good health. I was able to meet with him and speak privately. That I said, I cannot say I am very optimistic. However, we are fully committed to pursuing the necessary legal and judicial recourse.
The arrest of Komlan Susokwe has drawn strong criticism across Benin. Several Benin's human rights advocates are now calling for his immediate release.
Cotonou's correspondent Aziz Adam Sole's report presented by Augustin Colley. In Côte d'Ivoire, an open letter by Wadr Melo, vice president of the party of former President Laurent Gbagbo, is calling for the authorization of precautionary candidacies within the PPACI. This comes just over a month before the deadline for the submission of candidacies. Although Laurent Gbagbo has been named the party's official candidate, he remains ineligible due to the judicial conviction he continues to contest. Abdullahi Hassan completes the story.
The open letter from Wadr Melo, vice president of the PPACI, is addressed to Laurent Gbagbo, who serves as both party president and designated presidential candidate. Given Gbagbo's current ineligibility, Don Melo is urging that 2 or 3 senior party officials be allowed to submit their candidacies to avoid the politics of an empty chair during the upcoming October presidential election. He describes the move as a precautionary strategy aimed at ensuring the party is not excluded from the vote should Gbagbo remain ineligible. Don Melo notes that these alternative candidacies will be withdrawn if a political solution is found that allows Gbagbo to contest. The PPACI vice president also warns against a possible boycott, arguing that it will seriously weaken the party and undermine its political influence. The PPACI leadership says it is surprised by the release of the letter, stating that it had never been raised internally. The opposition party reaffirms that Laurent Gbagbo remains its sole candidate for the October election. However, the former Ivorian president is currently ineligible following a 2020 conviction by Ivorian courts, which sentenced him to 20 years in prison for the robbery of the Central Bank of West African states, a decision he has consistently contested.
Abdullah Hassan filed the report. You're still listening to Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and around the world on wadr.org. We are also live on Facebook at WADR English Service, as well as YouTube at WADR News. Here is a reminder of our top stories. Flags fly at half-marks in Nigeria as the country mourns former President Muhammadu Buhari. Meanwhile, African leaders and the AU have been paying glowing tribute to the late Nigerian leader. Vice President of Cote d'Ivoire's opposition party PPACI, Don Melo, urges the party to consider backup candidates amid Gbagbo's ineligibility. Togo's military goes to the polls today for municipal elections ahead of the July 17 elections amid government ban on new protests. Beninese journalist Komla Sukbe to appear in court following controversial extradition from Cote d'Ivoire. Still ahead in the news, we have the press review, guest interview, and sports news. Please stay with us.
Fresh and breaking news all the time. Hear it first as the news breaks, only on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Let me take you to Liberia, where the government has approved a 3-day protest organized by the civic advocacy group Solidarity of Trust for a New Day, short-named as STAND, scheduled to take place in Monrovia from July 15 to July 17, 2025. The authorization was issued through the Ministry of Justice after a meeting with STAND's representatives and other stakeholders over the weekend. The group, alongside parties or partners including the People Movement, the Progressive Student Alliance, and the Youth League of the Congress for Democratic Change (CDC), intends to use the protest to voice concerns over governance and alleged injustices under President Buakai's administration. WADR's Abraham Parker report from Monrovia.
During the meeting, Police Inspector General Gregory Coleman emphasized the importance of ensuring peace and order during the protest. The Solidarity of Trust for a New Day's leadership, led by Chairman Moluba Molu, pledged to cooperate with law enforcement agencies and adhere to the conditions set forth in their permit.
The protest organizers now call on all citizens across Liberia to intensify mobilization efforts to ensuring that tens of thousands of underprivileged, marginalized, downsized, peace-loving Liberians peacefully turn out in their numbers on July 17 to demand real and lasting change for the Republic.
Protesters are expected to march through key streets such as Tottenham Boulevard, Cinco, Ujro Island, and Central Time, concluding at Capitol Hill, where they plan to present a petition to the government. Meanwhile, a pro-government group, the Council of Patriots for Joseph Boakai and his vice president, announced plans to hold a separate gathering on July 17 at the Executive Mansion. According to Secretary General Chris Sanan, the event aims to honor what they described as President Boakai's leadership.
The Capitol Building will be no-go zone on the 17th. We will be using the Capitol Building and surrounding with a symbol. We will tell President Boakai, thank you. Will be there dancing for later for progress in the 1 year, 6 months.
As it stands, the government is yet to approve the pro-government group's planned action, but the Liberian Council of Churches is calling on STAND and its partners to exercise continuing restraint and demonstrate peacefully, emphasizing the importance of constructive dialogue in addressing the nation's concerns. For Newslink on WADR, Abraham Parker, Monrovia.
This is the newspaper review. Stay abreast and find out what the top stories are in your country.
This is the newspaper review.
The newspaper review.
Let's join Usman Umar from Nigeria for the press review today.
This is the press review coming to you from Nigeria's capital, Abuja. Today we have a couple of national dailies to take a look at, but it's important to say that all of the papers today are leading with the story on the demise of the former Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari, who died yesterday in London at the age of 81. Let's begin with the Nigerian News Direct, who says Tinubu, Atiku, Obi, Okonjo-Iweala, governors, others mourn as Buhari dies at 82, with two riders, as federal government orders 7 days of national mourning. And the Nigerian Governors Forum says the North has lost its moral compass. Let's take a look at this one. Purported defection of Adeleke stirs mixed reactions in Osun, PDP and APC. Of course, Adeleke is the governor of Osun State in the southwest of Nigeria. He is a staunch member. He ran for governorship and won under the platform of the People's Democratic Party. Of course, apart from the news of the passing of President Muhammadu Buhari, Awujale of Ijebu Land, Oba Sikiru Kayode, has also joined his ancestors yesterday. He died at the age of 91. He was a paramount ruler of Ijebu Land. That's another development. Now we go to the Blueprint newspaper, and the Blueprint has, of course, its leading story, Buhari bows out in London 25 months after exiting office. Nigeria Drug Law Enforcement Agency, NDLEA, nabs drug kingpin, finds narcotics in lipsticks, microwaves. Gunmen kidnap chief imam in Niger State, demand 30 million naira ransom. Foreign inflows hit $2.7 billion, highest in 29 months. This is a report from the aviation sector. And this is the much we have for you on today's edition of Press Review, as I now hand you back to the studios.
Thank you very much, Usman Umar from Nigeria, for the press review.
Politics,
Analysis on major news,
social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
In our guest interview this afternoon, we stay in Nigeria for more insight on the demise of former leader Muhammadu Buhari. In this interview, Usman Umar engaged Haruna Abdullahi, an author of the book The Buhari-ness, for his takes on the late leader's personality, leadership, and legacy.
It's indeed a grave loss for us as Nigerians.
You are an author of a very much celebrated book, The Buhari in Us. But first of all, kindly from your own bird's eye view, give us a summary of who the man Muhammadu Buhari, the former president, from your own perspective.
Late Muhammadu Buhari was an angelic human being molded in human aspirations. He were the gaps that separates the normal human beings from the extraordinary ones. He belongs to a cycle that you can call a mystery. He embodies an iconic representation of an ideal perfect man, whom you can actually describe as impeccable, faultless, and stainless. People like him come once in a generation. He's been the pathfinder, an icon figure, the bridge between yesterday and today, a Democrat. In fact, not just a Democrat, a dignified Democrat, given that he was coming from a military background with the expectation that he was going to be a ruthless Democrat. But contrary to people's expectation, he became a civilized Democrat. They actually set the ideals that redefine what real democracy is. Right. Describing this man is like describing a mystery, an enigmatic mystery, if you permit that word.
All right, let's delve into his leadership, stewardship, 1st January 1984 to August 1985. He was Nigeria's head of state. And then, upon our return to democracy, he ventured into the political arena, having contested about 3 times without success. But for the 4th time, he was able to lead Nigeria from May 29, 2015 to May 29, 2023. I want you to give us an idea of who you see the man as.
For Muhammadu Buhari kind of leadership, he will aptly be described as a solutionist leader who always comes when things are actually in disarray. When we are at the verge of collapse, that's when you see him. In 1984, he came when the country was run on a precipice, a near collapse, and from nowhere he came and actually salvaged the situation and redirected the ethos of a country called Nigeria. With the return of democracy in around 1999, he ventured into active political participation. And the people yearned for his kind of leadership because they knew he was coming to halt, the decade, the rot that has characterized leadership or governance in Nigeria. So repeatedly, just like you have said, he tried to win elections. He was actually denied because evidence abound that he did win his elections, but he was rigged out. Eventually in 2015, reason prevailed and the objects of rigging could not actually hold again. So the people finally elected the leader they wanted. At the time he came, the country was also at the point of breakdown. Insecurity has dominated every sphere of the country. Terrorists were having, field day until this man came and actually pushed the Boko Haram terrorists to the fringes. And for the time he spent as president, as democratically elected president, he provided solutions to governance. At the height of the COVID-19, when other nations were brought to their knees, this man held Nigeria to a surviving instinct because of the reforms he had put in place. Perhaps the first leader to have been visited with series of recessions. In all of this, he provided solutions. President Muhammadu Buhari left behind a legacy deeply rooted in integrity. You can call it patriotism and principled governance. His leadership, spanning decades of public service, both in military and democratic roles, actually gave several enduring hallmarks. Chiefly amongst them, you have integrity and anti-corruption. Perhaps the most defining legacy of Muhammadu Buhari was his uncompromising stance against corruption, both as a military head of state and as a two-time elected civilian president. He championed what I call transparency, fiscal discipline, and institutional efforts to combat graft, mostly notable through his support of agencies like the EFCC and the ICPC.
Haruna Abdullahi is the author of the book, The Buhari-ness. In sports this afternoon, we begin with some continental development as Botswana scored a dramatic injury time winner to beat Tunisia 2-1 on Sunday in Casablanca. But their dream of reaching the quarterfinals of the 2025 CAF Women's African Cup of Nations still hangs in balance. Earlier in the game, Tunisia took the lead in the 12th minute through a goal, and then Botswana fought back to equalize in the 66th minute. However, Botswana now waits to see if they will qualify as one of the third place teams. And elsewhere, Chelsea are the 2025 FIFA Club World Cup winners, thrashing Paris Saint-Germain 3-0 in yesterday's encounter. And that ends it for sports this afternoon. And with that, we've come to the end of this afternoon's edition of Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to Mustafa Sek and Sheikh Njai for the technical assistance. Do interact with us via our social media platforms, X, formerly Twitter, Instagram at WADR News, and on Facebook at WADR English Service. I am Christopher Ticho. Good afternoon and enjoy the rest of our broadcasts.
And many thanks to you for listening to Newslink via Hot 104.3 FM, New Me FM.